client's decision was that he did not wish to proceed to trial. He felt that by doing so, the family of his wife would be exposed to a number of very stressful and traumatic details. He did not want that to occur, so he instructed me to enter the guilty plea on his behalf. What happened?
I think he has some sense of remorse, but I don't think he really understands the gravity of what he's...
It was supposed to be the start of something new. Shannon Madill was just 25 years old, full of energy, laughter, and dreams. She was a young comedian who had the rare ability to make everyone around her smile. But in November 2014, all of that was stolen. She disappeared without a trace. Her car was still parked outside her home, her belongings left untouched, and her phone silent. For months, her family searched, the community rallied, and questions mounted. And then, nearly 8 months later, the horrifying truth emerged. The person responsible wasn't a stranger lurking in the dark. It wasn't a random act of violence. It was someone she knew. Someone she once trusted. Someone who had shared her life. This is the heartbreaking story of Shannon Madill. But before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe to Noir Crime, where we uncover real stories of tragedy, justice, and the fight for truth. We upload new videos every third day, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Shannon Madill, also known as Shannon Burgess after her marriage, was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta. She was a bright and passionate young woman who had a natural gift for making people laugh. Comedy wasn't just a hobby for her, it was her dream career. She performed stand-up routines, entertained her friends, and often auditioned for roles in local theater productions. Shannon had an energy that was infectious. People who knew her described her as vibrant, funny, and deeply caring. She had an independent spirit but remained closely connected to her family, particularly her mother, with whom she shared a very close bond. In 2012, Shannon married Joshua Burgess, a man she had been in a long-term relationship with. At first, things seemed fine. They were young, in love, and building a life together. But over time, cracks began to appear in their marriage. Friends noticed tension between them, and Shannon herself confided to some that things weren't working out the way she had hoped. Eventually, their relationship broke down, and they separated. But despite their separation, there were still lingering ties between them. Shannon hadn't completely closed the chapter with Joshua. Reports suggested she had been considering reconciliation, or at the very least, wanted to keep some form of communication. That complicated bond would later prove fatal. By late 2014, Shannon's life looked like it was heading in a better direction. She was focused on comedy, spending time with friends, and trying to move forward from her troubled marriage. But just when it seemed like she was ready to embrace a new chapter, tragedy struck. On November 27, 2014, Shannon visited her family for dinner. Everything seemed normal. She laughed, talked about her plans, and promised to see them again soon. Nobody could have guessed it would be the last time they saw her alive. The next day, Shannon was supposed to keep in touch with her mother. But her phone went silent. Calls went unanswered, texts unread. At first, her family thought maybe she was busy or needed some space. But hours turned into days, and worry turned into panic. On November 29, police were contacted and a missing persons report was filed. When officers checked Shannon's home, they found her car parked outside, and many of her personal belongings still inside. There was no sign of forced entry or a struggle. It was as if Shannon had simply vanished. The disappearance quickly became headline news in Calgary. Posters with Shannon's face went up across the city. Volunteers searched neighborhoods, parks, and riversides. Social media campaigns spread her photo, urging anyone with information to come forward. Her family, desperate for answers, pleaded on television for help. The police investigation naturally turned toward those closest to Shannon. Friends, colleagues, and especially her estranged husband, Joshua Burgess, were questioned. Joshua told police he hadn't seen Shannon recently and claimed he had nothing to do with her disappearance. At that point, with no solid evidence, authorities couldn't charge him. But for Shannon's loved ones, something about the situation didn't feel right. Her sudden silence, her car abandoned, and the complete lack of clues, it all pointed to something darker than a voluntary disappearance. For months, the case dragged on with no breakthrough. And all the while, Shannon's family lived in agony, holding on to hope but fearing the worst. By summer 2015, it had been more than 7 months since Shannon was last seen. Leads had dried up, and the case was growing cold. But everything changed in July 2015. Police, acting on new information, returned to the home of Joshua Burgess, Shannon's estranged husband. What they found was horrifying. Hidden inside his garage, they discovered Shannon's body. The nightmare was finally confirmed. Shannon had been killed, and all this time, she had been hidden just steps away from the man who claimed ignorance. When confronted with the evidence, Joshua eventually confessed. He admitted that Shannon had come to his house the night she disappeared. An argument broke out, escalating into violence. Joshua claimed he snapped and killed her. Instead of calling for help, he chose to hide her body in his garage. The community was shaken. The very man who had once stood beside Shannon at the altar had been the one to take her life. For her family, the pain was unimaginable. Not only had they lost Shannon, but they had to face the cruel reality that someone she loved had been her killer. Joshua Burgess was arrested and charged. The trial revealed disturbing details. Joshua insisted he hadn't planned Shannon's death but admitted to killing her during an argument. Prosecutors, however, painted a picture of a man who was controlling and unwilling to let go. In 2017, after legal proceedings stretched on, Joshua pleaded guilty to manslaughter and committing an indignity to a human body. The judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. For many, it felt like a light punishment for the life he had taken. Shannon's family sat through the hearings, listening to the man who had stolen their daughter's life. In emotional victim impact statements, they described their grief, the void left behind, and the torment of knowing Shannon's final moments were filled with fear. The sentence did little to ease their pain. 10 years in prison for a life lost felt inadequate. But at the very least, there was accountability. Shannon's death left a permanent scar on her family and community. Her parents, devastated, continued to speak out about the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. For Calgary's artistic and comedy community, Shannon's absence was deeply felt. She had been a rising star, someone who brought joy wherever she went. To honor her memory, friends organized events and fundraisers, ensuring that Shannon would not be remembered only for the way she died, but for the light she brought during her life. Her case also highlighted the hidden dangers of toxic relationships. Shannon's story became a reminder that violence often comes not from strangers, but from those closest to us. Even years later, her name continues to spark conversations about justice, prevention, and the need for stronger support systems for women. Shannon Madill's story is one of unfulfilled dreams, stolen laughter, and a life cut far too short. She was a daughter, a friend, an artist, a young woman who deserved so much more than the fate handed to her. Her case reminds us to never ignore the warning signs of abuse, and to stand by those who may be trapped in toxic or dangerous relationships. If Shannon's story moved you, help keep her memory alive by sharing this video. And don't forget to subscribe to Noir Crime, where we bring you real stories of tragedy, justice, and survival. We upload new videos every third day, stories that need to be told, and voices that deserve to be heard. Together, we can shine a light on the darkness, and honor the memory of those who were silenced too soon.